Answer this next question first. What is your evaluation of the financial condition of the water district?
Well, the financial condition of the water district is pretty good if you look at the books today. They have a very strong reserve. They've got $220 million in their reserves, and they're in pretty good shape. Now, there are some real risks out there, though. They have this lawsuit that Brian mentioned that may affect their revenue in the future. They have a situation with one of the dams, which you probably read about in the paper recently. We don't know the real problem there yet. That's not defined. This is just the very early stages of understanding that there is a problem. But the scope of the problem, in my opinion, is not really established at this time. But that represents a potential problem. So they could have very, very serious financial problems in the future. And I think if all things turn out bad for them, they will be forced to turn to a different business model than what they have currently. And so I would say they look fine on paper today, but there's a big question mark out there in the future. It depends on this lawsuit and on the work that they may have to do on the dams, which is a major surprise to them.
What he said, but yeah, the lawsuit will be a big issue. That's 20% of the district's funding. They might be able to recover that quickly, but it also might be possible that any recovery of that funding for groundwater production charges would have to comply with Prop 218, meaning a 2/3 vote from possibly the well owners. And that could be difficult, so that there could be a problem, a serious problem with that issue. And the other issue that I'd like, there's also the Anderson Dam issue that has been a concern for a number of years, but the latest report seems to indicate that it's serious. Even if the fix of the Anderson Dam is extremely expensive, quite likely will be expensive. We have an interim period where very little reduced water storage is possible at Anderson Dam, which does most of our surface water storage. So the third issue is climate change and the rise of ocean levels in the San Francisco Bay. I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of voters who are concerned, and I think rightly so, about bay level rise and the possibility of bay flooding. It's something that we are going to have to address. For the flooding along creeks, they already are designing the levees so that they can handle the increased flooding on the creeks that are down very close to the bay, but that still doesn't solve the problem of the rise of the bay itself. That is probably a very expensive issue that will have to be addressed. One possibility is when it becomes time to decide whether or not to renew the Clean Safe Creeks measure, if they're going to focus on bay level rise as one of those issues. And that may come soon because they want to do that. Most likely they'll want to do that at the time of maximum voter turnout, which happens during presidential election cycles. So it could be in November 2012. So getting public support and trust in the water district, I think, is a key issue in order to address some of these challenges.
Okay, the next question, which Mr. Schmidt will take first. Can you comment on, following up on your answer there, does the greatest flood threat come from streams or from sea level rise on the bay? And then, based on the steps to mitigate those, if it requires infrastructure upgrades for that and also for dam safety that you also, both of you were talking about, how should those costs be financed?
Well, that wasn't a very narrow question. What about flooding in our county? Which is an entirely valid question. I think part of it depends on the time constraints that we're looking at. Bay level rise is a very serious issue. Most likely that will be the most expensive. Certainly it would be the most expensive of any single issue. We do have a little bit more time to deal with that. We need to be planning for it soon. The rise of the bay, though, isn't going to be happening that bad within the next 10, 20 years. So we need to deal with other issues. Anderson Dam, I think, is a particularly urgent one. And then the different flooding issues. I know one issue that is important in District 7 is San Francisco Creek. which flooded, many people might remember back in the 1998 flood. And there had seemed to be very little progress for the 10 years following that. There is actually progress now on San Francisco Creek with planning and dealing with the lowest stretch of the creek from Highway 101 to the bay. Hope is hopefully going to get into actual construction maybe late next year. The environmental review should be coming out in a couple months on that level of work. So there's bits and pieces that have to be dealt with. And their funding sources come from a whole variety of levels. That measure that I mentioned now several times, Clean Safe Creeks, provided some of the funding both for the Permanente Creek project and for the planning for the San Francisco Creek project. It has, and some other areas too, that it provides additional funding, and also from property rates. The district gets a partial component of that. All these parts need to be put together, particularly the Corps of Engineers. And for that, we need help and alliances in Congress to be able to help out with that as well.
I think when we start to try to solve the problem of the rising of the bay, this is a problem that's much bigger than our county. It involves other counties, it involves much of the state. And so I think what we have to do is the federal government, we have to get the federal government to step up to the plate here. I think we have to bring someone like the Corps of Engineers or some agency of that type in and deal with it on a larger scale. If you try to deal with it on a county scale, we'll have a problem because one county will do one thing, another county will do another, and we won't have a systematic approach to it. So I believe that we must encourage and take the steps to try and bring the federal government to the table here some way so they participate in planning and taking the lead. They need to sponsor that kind of program to protect us from rising of the bay. I think, and the other issues such as the creeks and like San Francisco Creek, the district did participate, and they put their money up to participate in the design and the planning of this. Again, that's a Corps of Engineer project, and they've got to go to Congress and get the money to do that work. And that's the way that program will proceed. But I think they really are going to have to think about the projects in our own county that they're supposed to concentrate on, and that's where they need to put their emphasis.
Okay. Mr. Becker, you'll take this one first. This question is about rates. For example, non-agricultural well owners are charged 31.5 times what agricultural well owners are. Do you think this is fair that agricultural customers are subsidized? And can you comment on this particular issue and about rates in general?
Rates are something that need attention. I understand the disparity that you bring here. There is a difference in what we sell water for to the agricultural people and what we sell well water for. And this is we are going to, I think, always subsidize agriculture to some extent. And we can't just draw back on our county because this is a state problem. And they have to be competitive with the rest of the state and the other states too. And so we're sort of locked in with some subsidies, I believe. But you also have problems between North County and South County. You could have a well in the South County and an identical well in the North County, same depth, same pump the same quantity of water, and you're going to pay twice as much in the North as you do in the South. And they say, well, it's because of treated water, but we're not treating that well water. So there's a big issue on the rates that we are charging for well water. And I think these must be reviewed, and they got to be reviewed with a spirit of fairness. And I understand all of the problems within agriculture. We all support it, and we will continue to support it. But we must stop and think and take a good look at these rates, and I think come forward with a plan that's more fair to the public.
I think that ratio is a little bit, actually quite a bit small if you're comparing agriculture in South County with groundwater production charges in South County. It sounded like they're comparing it to North County groundwater production charges. And there's not that much ag agriculture in North County. But I do think that agriculture subsidies, something that is often water subsidies is often very destructive in other places. Like you can go out to Central Valley and see rice farming and in 100-degree weather. You can see cotton, which is very water intensive, or alfalfa, even more water intensive. Cotton that has to have a lot of pesticides sprayed on it, and all that using that water in a way that's destructive. In our area, it's a little bit different because our agriculture provides an economic incentive to do something for the land other than sprawl. There are alternatives to farming, which would be more sprawl. And for that reason, I think subsidies here is useful, especially if farmers here do water conservation. They actually do have a pretty good water conservation program in Santa Clara County with the water district working in conjunction with the Farm Bureau. Now, I've tangled with the Farm Bureau in the past in my job as an open space advocate, but I think they do a really good job with this water conservation program. And for that reason, I think the disparity, while it might sound stark, is actually useful. They're providing local food for us and helping stop sprawl. Thank you.
What changes, if any, would you suggest for the way the Water Board does business, and how would you envision effectively building a consensus on the board to implement that change, Mr. Schmidt? Yeah.
There's a number of changes that I've mentioned regarding how the Water Board does business, like meeting in the evening so that so people can actually attend the Water District Board. I've heard Lou mention a number of times doing training for the Water District Board, which I think is a great idea. Supervisor Gage, who's running District 1, has mentioned that. So has, I believe, Linda Lazat running District 4. All these are good ideas for doing training for District Board members. And having basically a sense of respect for each other, I think, is an important component of that. I've been asked for a number of times, who would I align myself with on the District Board? And I'm not going to align myself with any particular faction of the District Board. I know some folks, so they look at that last grand jury report that went after Director Santos, and they said, are you going to be fighting Director Santos? If Director Santos and I agree on some things, and I've seen him actually do a good job on things like creek cleanup and other environmental issues, I'm going to be very happy to have his vote. On other issues like Alviso, he and I might disagree fairly strenuously, but I think you can still do that and keep a civil perspective and civil relationship, and I think that can help restore the credibility of the Water District Board.
Well, those are all good ideas, and I think one thing they really could work on a lot is their communication with other areas of government, particularly with city councils. They don't reach out to the councils, for example, and share with them their concerns about things like setbacks from creeks. They don't come forward very quickly on saying how they could use open space that is along some of these creek right-of-ways, how it could be used for trails or open space for communities. And these are areas where they could build a lot of good public will and do some good for their communities. I think I would like to see an increase in incentives for conservation measures. Some of the incentives are limited by dollar value, and when the dollars are spent, there are no more incentives. I'd like to see that changed where we put more money into conservation and make those incentives last longer and make them more plentiful to the public. And then I feel that we do have this video streaming on the internet that you can watch a meeting. And I've watched the meetings, and I know something about the subject that they're discussing, and I have a hard time following it because they don't give you any data. They introduce the subject, they say it's about such and such, and you know what the conclusion is, what they voted, but you don't have any data to understand what's really going on. And that's bad. They need to provide charts and graphs and backup data in this viewing so that the public can look at it and they can go along and understand how these decisions are made and why they're made the way they are. So just having better communications is a big step forward. So these are some of the things I would work on to try to improve the way they do business.
This next question is a more technical question. So this, I'm going to call this a lightning round question and give you each 30 seconds to answer it. And the person that goes first, actually the person that goes second has an advantage because the first person will answer the question. But question is, Mr. Becker, you go first. How much is a water board member paid, and does a board member work a set amount of time every month?
Right now, I don't know how much they're paid. They were getting paid $260 some a meeting, and they could not go to more than 10 meetings a month. Yeah, I know, and I think most of them go to 10 meetings. But that is, they have 2 basic meetings that they're supposed to, that are scheduled every month. Then they put in some other meetings, but then they can go to any meeting that they want to, so they add up pretty fast.
The district board members were paid $260.03 per meeting, up to 10 meetings per month. They can go to more meetings, but they can only be compensated for that amount. On Tuesday, they raised their pay to $286.03 per meeting. I submitted a letter and spoke to them saying the pay should actually be cut by more than 50%. They disagreed with me.
That's a surprise.
Okay, and Mr. Schmidt, you go first. This is our last question. How do you see the district's role in promoting water conservation in the county? We'll let you have 2 minutes each again for this question.
Well, the district probably has the best bully pulpit in trying to do that, but although it has to work closely with the local governments as well. The issue that I've been wrestling with throughout my candidacy is trying to think, what can the district do without additional resources? The Clean Safe Creeks measure is one thing that I think is an opportunity to retarget resources, so some of the money can be spent more to water conservation and watershed restoration in a redesigned Clean Safe Creeks measure when it comes to the ballot. Other issues like decreasing impervious surface can result in more groundwater recharge, so that's another issue of water conservation. And then having metering in places that don't currently have metering, like apartments, is something that can be helpful. So those are basically 1,000 different cuts of trying to make small differences and changes, or ways to help improve our water conservation. I'm trying to figure out how to do that again without new and increased spending, and that's something because I don't think the public is ready for an increase like the 10% budget compensation increase that they gave us, and that's an issue that we'd have to be wrestling with in the future.
I think their conservation plans are pretty good. If you look at, they got a volunteer reduction of about 17% last year. And that's really a good response by the public. But I think they can expand this if they put more money into it, and I support that, to offer people more incentives to buy into things that help save water. I think also the programs they have with agriculture needs to be expanded. If you look at the consumption of water in agriculture, there's about 80% of our water goes there. And so there's a tremendous potential for saving water with agriculture if they can come up with ways to encourage agriculture to implement the ideas that they have tried and proven. And so I would want to really encourage that. And then, as Brian mentioned, you have a lot of apartments and trailer parks that do not have individual meters. And so these people have no idea how much water they're using, and that their cost is not apparent to them, and so sometimes they're wasteful. And when they put meters in, individual meters, you find that people start saving water. So that's another thing that we could do that would be very useful and conserving for the future.
And thank you both. We will now have closing statements, and I'd like to remind each candidate that you have 2 minutes, and we will hear from you in reverse order of the opening statements. So Mr. Schmidt, you'll go first, followed by Mr. Becker.
Well, once again, I want to thank everybody for coming today, and also thank Lou for putting up with me repeated times here. We've done quite a few of these things together. One of the issues, as I just mentioned, is trying to get improvements under situations of cost control. An example that I mentioned before, but I'd like to get into a little bit more detail, is how we can address the fact that we have the most mercury-contaminated county in the state, with 5 of the 20 worst mercury-contaminated water bodies in the state here in Santa Clara County. The idea that I'm thinking about, which is not my idea, I've stolen it, is to have state legislation that requires anyone who brings mercury into the state either clean up their mercury or participate in existing mercury cleanup efforts. I think, for example, you take compact fluorescent lights or even the batteries on the watches that many people are wearing here today. There's mercury in those. And the importers that bring these massive quantities of lights or watches, they can either have some type of buyback project or they can help out existing cleanup programs. I think they will find it in their economic interest to help out existing cleanup programs. So that's an idea of, instead of having the ratepayers pay more for improvement, having polluters pay more to fix a problem that's out there. So I have more of these ideas, and that's one other thing I wanted to say in the time that we have today is how to find out and get more information. You can go to my website, which is brianforwater.org, F-O-R, not Brian, numeral 4. And we have a Facebook site too, just look up Brian Schmidt. And there's just a number of ways we can address these issues. I just closed with I went to a study session for the Cuesta Park Annex, and both at that study session and elsewhere, I've seen people that have been really upset with the water district. And I think one thing that we're going to need to do, the challenge is, instead of just doing the regular process, actually reaching out to people that are concerned about those issues and trying to get to them prospectively. And I think we can do that to make a change. Thank you.
Thank you. I also thank you for coming today and spending time and listening to us. We had a very interesting competition here for this position. I've enjoyed competing against Brian. We've been very respectful of each other, and we're going to continue to be that way and keep this a good race and an interesting race. As I look forward, I can tell you basically what I want to do. I want to concentrate, bringing this board around to focusing on its prime responsibilities, those core issues that it's supposed to do. Supply water for the county in adequate quantity, and take care of the watershed area, and do the things it's supposed to do to keep the creeks clean and improve the status of those streams and reservoirs. And then take care of flood protection. These are what they need to concentrate, and I want to bring them around to concentrating on those things and put their charter creeping out into other areas and spending their efforts where other people should be doing the work and not them. I want to bring a cost-conscious attitude to the whole district, and I would like to provide that leadership. I want to get that board and the whole district to think about what's the most cost-effective way to do things. How can we save money? Because money is going to be tight in the future, and we need to hold down the water rates. If you look at the projected rate of increase, it's something like over 8% per year going forward for water. And this means that the water that you buy is going to double in the next 8 or 9 years. That's a big increase. Most people are not going to see that in their paychecks. And then I want to work on transparency. It's so important that you understand what they're really doing. They've been on operation for 80 years or more, and most people in the public don't know what they do or how they reach decisions and what the responsibilities are. This needs to change. So if I get elected, I will bring about those changes. Thank you very much.
I would now like to thank our volunteers, Sue Graham, Clara Noonan, and Crownie Billick, who have been our timers, and Gabrielle Thielen, who's our voter service director and who organized this whole event today. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Los Altos Mountain View and our co-sponsoring organizations, the Los Altos Library, the Cupertino Sunnyvale League of Women Voters, the Palo Alto League of Women Voters, the American Association of University Women, and KMTV 15 Community Television, I want to thank the candidates for participating in this forum. And I'd like to thank all of you for being such an attentive audience and asking such good questions. And I also want to remind you to vote on November 2nd and encourage your family, friends, and neighbors to vote also. So I think it's time now to give us all a round of applause for